Hey, it's Aaron. We got a lot to talk about today. If you don't know what I'm going to be talking about today, then you've been obviously living under a rock for the last few days. But if you do, you're probably pretty excited. Probably a little bit like me. Let's just get into it. Okay, so the very first thing that I want to say is there's an old saying that goes something like, "The revolution won't be televised." But clearly, those people didn't know about Unicorn Riot. Now, if you don't know who Unicorn Riot is, they are a media organization who work out of Minneapolis, who did some incredibly amazing work yesterday, capturing pretty much every important moment of a massive protest that happened in downtown Minneapolis over the death of a man named George Floyd. Now, George Floyd was murdered, lynched by the police in a very slow, very disgusting way. I couldn't actually even bring myself to watch this video because I've seen enough of this stuff. This is my job. I'm in the media and I see almost every single day black and brown people being brutally murdered and beaten and tormented by the police. So this specific video I couldn't bring myself to watch, but what I understand happened is basically a police officer apprehended George and continued to put him down onto the ground and asphyxiate him until he died. And in doing that ended up sparking such a massive controversy that basically the entire city erupted, not just in protest, but in flames. Okay, so it started off very peaceful. Everything seemed to be going just fine. There was a lot of marches, a lot of demonstrations, a lot of very angry individuals, considering that one of the people from their community had just been murdered in the midst of what I have been calling an actual genocide of African American people in the United States. It's disgusting, it's deplorable, and everybody's outrage I think was entirely justified, and they went and took to the streets to do something about it. Now, they were completely peaceful for a very long time, but unfortunately, after a certain amount of time, as usual, the state decided to escalate the situation and basically begin acting violent towards the people and hitting them with pepper spray and tear gas and a lot of other incredibly dangerous chemical weapons. By the way, tear gas is a chemical weapon that is no longer allowed to be used in war. It's a war crime. These weapons, of course, have already been deemed illegal to use against any enemy combatant all across the entire world. It's actually a war crime, but entirely fine to use these dangerous chemical weapons against your own people, the American people. Because, of course, a bunch of minorities were getting rowdy, so we have to deal with them in the most lethal ways possible. So as these police officers, state assault forces, as I like to call them, continued their rampage through the crowd of peaceful protesters, the protesters were pretty much fed up with it and not taking this shit anymore, so they started hurling rocks. This was not only happening in Minneapolis, it was also happening, I believe, a little bit in Los Angeles, and a few other places were showing solidarity, and the police got destroyed. They were destroyed. They didn't stand a chance. Don't get me wrong, the state brought every weapon in its arsenal. It brought the riot gear, it brought the helmets, it brought the vehicles, the barricades, the rubber bullets, everything. And they didn't stand a chance against a bunch of untrained individuals throwing rocks and bottles. Like I was saying on Twitter, all that training in Israel, all that protective equipment, all those assault-style tactics and weapons and armor and gear, and none of it amounted to anything at all. Because at the end of the day, the people were the one that stood victorious. Angry citizens from across the entire city all amassed in downtown Minneapolis to deal with this legitimate, honest-to-God threat to their lives. And they did a fantastic job of it. They forced the police back. They pushed them back into their precinct. They destroyed the precinct. Again, hey, I'm going to say here, I'm not going to condemn nor condone any of the actions that were taken by the protesters, But there is no way in the world that you could look at this incident and say that they didn't come out on top at the end of the day. The police took their lives, so they took the property. That's basically what happened. The police were forced back into their precinct. They were forced into a tiny little alcove, so they had to defend against this horde of angry people against their tiny little tower that was being laid siege to. In the meantime, the people went around literally setting fire to every adjacent building and smashing out all the windows. All the king's horses and all the king's men were forced into a tiny little area and allowed to just cry into their arms as they watched this city that they like to claim they protect fall into complete and total disarray. Minneapolis yesterday became ungovernable. Through the course of events, an auto zone got set on fire, and they spray painted across the side of the auto zone autonomous zone, which I thought was actually really quite brilliant. Autonomous zone is basically a free territory that has liberated itself from the surrounding state. So auto zone, autonomous zone, very fitting, very clever. And also there are a lot of other things that happened as well. A Wendy's or a Burger King, a fast food joint of some kind caught on fire. It was taken out entirely. And a massive brand new condo complex. Nobody was living in it. It was completely empty. It was still being constructed by some wealthy capitalists. And that was taken down as well. Completely engulfed in flames. Fell to the ground. And literally no tears are shed by me, because as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of people are going to have, this is where a lot of people are going to have the problem. A lot of liberals are going to come in and say, I can't believe that you would think that this is a good thing. How could you look at all of this destruction and think, wow, awesome? And I would have to say it's because I don't give a shit about Windows lives. I don't care about property. I don't care about buildings. I don't care about the stuff inside of those buildings. I care about human fucking beings, because they're the only thing in the world that we should be caring about when it comes to this sort of situation. And if a bunch of people wanted to let their aggression out, rightfully so, justifiably so, and do this sort of thing, well, unfortunately, that's just the course that humanity has decided to take. And I'm not going to shed any tears for Target. They were looted, completely, entirely looted. And even though a few fights did break out on the ground, a few fist fights here and there wasn't actually any real violence among the protesters themselves, at least not against other people. Certainly against property and against the state assault forces, but I digress. Of course, there was one incident broadcast by our friend and yours, Andy Fuckhead No, where it depicted what seemed to be an elderly lady bound to a wheelchair being attacked by a bunch of violent black people, spraying her with a fire extinguisher, and oh my god, the humanity. And it turns out Andy was just lying, like he always does, and specifically editing the video so you wouldn't actually find out that this elderly lady bound to a wheelchair was actually not bound to a wheelchair at all, and had a fucking knife and was going around stabbing people. So when you see that video clip of an elderly lady just being blasted away by a fire extinguisher, yeah, it was because she was stabbing people. There were also a few gun nut chuds that decided that a bunch of TVs and $1 chocolate bars were worth more than people's lives. So they decided that they would become their own little police force and decided to start guarding some of the shops and that sort of thing. A lot of things happened. Anyway, it was pandemonium. This is just a bit of a taste of what is actually going to come. The next 2 to 5 years are going to be some of the most dramatic things I believe any of us have ever seen in any of our lives. This is not going to get better immediately. It's going to get worse. Things are going to escalate even more. And this makes me want to put out the message that it is time for us to prepare. It's time for us to get ready. It's time for us to do everything we can to build the world that we want to see. Mass line organizing, building dual power structures, and the most important thing of all, we have to be spreading class consciousness. We can't jump into this new world without anybody actually knowing how it's going to function. So with all of that being said, thank you very much for watching. My name is Aaron. If you do get a chance, check out all the links in the description box below. Hit that little bell button so you get notifications every time I release a video, because they're not going to let you know when I release a video. And make sure to hit that subscribe button. They're unsubscribing people every single day. Thank you very much for watching. Have a nice day.
Right now, you got a city riot going on because once again, the police has failed to protect us like they say they was going to do. Us as a community, we're not going to protect ourselves, but if we don't have anyone to protect us, then this is what you get. You get riots. You got people out here going crazy. We losing loved ones every day to the people that's sworn in to protect us. It's not us. It's the police. This the madness that they spark up. This is what they encourage. This is what they provoke. This is what you get out of you taking a loved one from someone. This is what you get. You get a lot of people that's hurt, and they can't vent the right way. They can no longer depend on the police to be here to protect us like they say they gonna do. So this is what you get. And no, it's not gonna end today. I can't tell you it's gonna end tomorrow. I don't know when it's gonna end. But it's for y'all to start. We're not the ones that's killing us. Y'all killing us. We can't make a change if y'all don't change.